All right, welcome back everybody to conversation number 93. We're going to be talking from stage fright to stage confidence, how to overcome stress and anxiety in public speaking with Michael Aagaard. But before we get started, let's start by thanking our sponsors. We'll start with Conductrix, who've been with us from the very beginning. Thank you, Matt, Nate, Ezekiel, Ashley, and the entire team at Conductrix so much for supporting the TLC. We really appreciate you. We'd also like to thank our other TLC newsletter sponsors, starting with Conductrix again, Growthbook, AB Smartly, and SiteSpec. Thank you all for providing your thought leadership to the community. And we also want to thank Convert for conversations. If you're not participating, hop over to the conversations channel. You have the opportunity to engage, learn a little bit about each other, share something about yourself. It's a really great opportunity. And of course, there's an opportunity to win a little moolah, right? By sharing something about yourself and learning about others. So each month we ask questions in the channel. This month's theme is growth. So go ask, answer questions, and you might have a chance to win some money. So why not? And then also thank you, Convert, Blazing Growth, and all of our sponsors for your sponsorship money that helps with all of our the sponsoring the TLC Slack and all of our sponsorship money that helps with our oh my gosh, what are they called? The money that helps us with scholarships. Thank you. We couldn't do it without you. So announcements and reminders. Monday, Ruben and I start the Building Award-Winning Experimentation Culture learning group. We have 2 slots left. I know it's really short notice, but if you want to join, it starts Monday. It's an 8-week cohort class. And we actually have 2 scholarships for $800 off. So you only pay $200 for this class. If you want it, reach out to me. I've got the link. We already have 6 people in the class. 5 people in class. We'd like to have 7. So 2 people left. If you want those slots, reach out to me. You'd only have to pay $200 for the class, which again, that's a huge deal. So if you don't want the spot, but you think somebody else will, reach out, let me know. And you can save your spot at bit.ly AB culture and then reach out to me and I'll give you the link for the remaining $190. Okay, so Michael, hopefully
Hello.
everybody knows Michael, but Michael I'm thrilled to welcome you back, Michael.
Thank you.
He's obviously a renowned keynote speaker, CRO expert, and speaker coach with more than 15 years of experience, but he's also, like I said already, he's an expert speaker coach. He's helping us with TLC Mentorship Summit. Some of our mentees
Yes.
are here. Welcome. At Experimentation Elite in June again, and he's now accepting students for coaching. And today he's going to give us a hint at what you could learn from him if you signed up for that coaching. So I am going to pass it over to you. I guess I'm just going to stop sharing and we're going to see what this is all about. I'm really excited to see how this goes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. As Kelly mentioned a little bit ago, maybe not all of you heard because we've had a couple people join since. I'm going to try something completely new today that I've never done before, and that is a presentation entirely without slides. Because normally I spend a lot of time on my slides and I can kind of lean on my slides a little bit, but I'm changing that completely today. So I guess it's kind of ironic that I'm talking about managing nerves and stress when I'm probably going to be more nervous than I normally am. This is completely different. So let's hope my advice also works for myself today. It does. It does. Cool. Well, oh, and sorry, this also means, of course, that there's no slides to share afterwards. So you have to listen carefully and take notes along the way, or watch the recording afterwards. Of course, you can do that too. I would love for you guys to participate today. I know that can be intimidating and so on, but if you have any questions, please ask along the way, and Kelly and Marcella can help us with those questions. And then after I've gone through the presentation here today, or talk through the information I want to give you without slides. I'd love if you guys could share some of the situations that make you nervous or ask questions, anything. And again, there's nothing, it's completely safe and there's no stupid question or anything. I'd love to hear a little bit about it. I'd love to be able to help you out on this call also. And the advice I'm giving you now is very effective, but also I'd love to hear, more personal questions. Maybe I can help you. Cool. I had ChatGPT help me do a little bit of research recently on the greatest fears, the most common greatest fears among people in the Western world. And public speaking, of course, is very high on the list. On some of the surveys, it's actually it's higher on the list than fear of death, which I find quite interesting. Another thing that is quite interesting about the fear of kind of public speaking is it does revolve around a couple of other really, really fundamental fears most people have. And it's the fear of rejection, for example, the fear of, not being liked, the fear of failure, and the fear of being alone. Because for the most part, when you present, certainly when you do a keynote at a conference, you're all alone on stage. You got a lot of people staring you down. There's a there's a high likelihood that you could fail if you haven't, prepared and you don't know the audience well. And also just the whole aspect of rejection. And that could also just be perceived rejection, right? And it, especially if you're a new speaker, it can be a bit hard to gauge the reaction from the audience, which can make you even more nervous. So one of my main points, and one of the things I always say to the people I coach when we talk about this whole topic here, and almost everyone deals with it, is that it's absolutely natural. It's like a totally normal reaction. It's nothing to be ashamed about. It would be strange if you weren't nervous. Like I would be more worried if you weren't nervous, because then I'd be thinking like, what's wrong with you? Or do you not care enough about this? And I think we have a tendency maybe to be ashamed if we feel really nervous, or like it's wrong, or like we're imposters if we feel nervous, and we have a tendency maybe to even try and pretend like we're not, or try to push it away or fight it, which in my experience is probably the worst thing you can do, because then you're going directly against your body and your brain's natural reaction to a very intense situation you're about to experience. And another thing I hear a lot is when people talk about nerves, they say to me, well, you're so experienced, you don't deal with that anymore. And I go, thank you. That is extremely flattering. But of course I do. Like I get extremely nervous before every talk I do. I've been doing this for a long time. So my nerves now are different than in the beginning. In the beginning, it was, fear of complete failure and so on. Now I'm pretty confident, due to my experience, that I'm not going to fail miserably. But every single time I do a talk, I'm trying to do the best talk I've ever done. And I deal a lot with like, rejection sensitivity. And and that's a big thing for me. I really want the audience to like what I'm doing, and I want them to like me personally. So I still get really worked up every single time. I can give you an example. Uh, Last year, I did a lot of the different conferences within our industry. So it's going to be a couple of years before I get invited back. I did a lot of them, and it was I was doing a new presentation, and so I was speaking in Romania, and I hadn't done the presentation for a while, and then I didn't have quite enough time to practice as much as I wanted, so I was kind of obsessing over it, and I ended up sleeping just a couple of hours that night, which was kind of rough. I still, got on stage. I did well and so on, and a long day of traveling home and so on. But the thing that happened was I kind of psyched myself, because then the next time I was speaking, which was at GMS in Frankfurt, and that's a conference I really care a lot about. I've spoken there many times before, and I know a lot of people in the audience, and it's a conference where I really want to do well. And then my brain started going, hey man, remember last time when you couldn't sleep? What if that happens again? And then instead of getting 2 hours sleep, I got zero sleep, like none at all, which is rough. So yeah, the next morning I was really feeling it. But using the techniques and the different tips and stuff and the approaches that I'm going to share with you today, I was able to, really manage it quite well. I did the opening keynote, and I was the highest rated speaker at the conference, despite, you know, you know, being out there with no sleep and so on. set it up. Okay, so today we're going to talk about, first of all, we're going to talk about understanding what happens in our body and our brain when we feel nervous, when we feel anxious, when we feel stressed. In my experience, that's extremely important, because once you understand what's going on, it's not like this outside foreign element. You can actually become more comfortable with it. And then also, once you understand what it is, you can accept the fact that you're nervous, and then you can learn how to manage it. And those, to me, are the three most important steps. And this has worked very well for me, and it's worked for a lot of the people I've coached. And then we'll talk about the most kind of fundamental way of managing nerves and stress, like kind of the core thing. And then after that, I'm going to go through a bunch of like practical tips and stuff that you can use. Does that sound good? Cool. Okay. So as I said before, being nervous is completely natural, and what's going on is like simply the human stress response. It's fight or flight. Your body is getting you ready to face a perceived threat or challenge. You're getting ready to face like something that is very, very important to you. And the thing is that our stress response is completely generic, in the sense that it doesn't really matter if you're being hunted down by a grizzly bear, or if you're standing on stage in front of a couple of hundred people. It's the evolution is very, very slow, right? And so these are very, very strong reactions we have. And of course, they have to be strong, because they have to get our attention, because this is, for our ancestors, this was literally about life or death. We still have those feelings. So once we trigger the fight or flight reaction, we get all those things. And it is essentially telling your brain you might die, right? So that kind of explains why it can feel so intense for us. And so essentially what happens, and I know this is much more complicated than I make it out to be. I'm going to simplify it, but essentially what's happening is you're going into your sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, performance mode, right? And then the opposite of that is the parasympathetic. That's rest and digest, and it's recovery mode. And so you can kind of think of it as like a seesaw. There's a balance there. And that's really what managing stress essentially is about, is managing whether you're in performance or recovery mode, whether it's sympathetic or parasympathetic. We don't want to be completely in the parasympathetic, because then we're not going to have the energy it takes to actually be on stage and perform. So you do want some nerves, and that nervous energy, if you can manage it, can give you superpowers. Like you think faster than ever, and you got adrenaline, and you can be funny, and you can be you can do all these things on stage that maybe you can't normally, because you get adrenaline, you get norepinephrine, and all that good stuff coursing through your veins. The thing is, you don't want to go into panic mode. So you don't want to go into full-on fight or flight, because then all bets are off, and that's when it gets really gnarly. So another thing is that the stress reaction, for us, it feels uncomfortable in these situations, and it can feel like it's an obstacle, but it's there to help us, right? It's there to kind of physically amp us. It primes us for movement. It increases your heart rate, blood pressure, and stuff. So you get more muscle, more oxygen and blood in your muscles, and so on. You get dilated pupils. You get heightened awareness, tunnel vision, all that good stuff. And your heart rate variability goes down, so you have a steady heartbeat and all that stuff. So all that can feel really uncomfortable, but understanding that it's there to help you can also help you reframe everything that's going on from something negative, something you don't want, to actually something that's positive, that's there to help you. And to me, at least, this has helped me really get a much better relationship with the stress reaction, and help me manage it. Because before I understood these things, it was just something that happened to me that was completely out of my control. And that's what I hear from a lot of people. You start spinning, and understanding that makes a huge difference. Does that make sense so far, guys? Cool. So it's not about fighting it, it's about learning to manage it. And so another really important thing here, something that to me fundamentally changed my whole approach to managing my nerves and so on, is that this is a physiological reaction. It might be caused by something psychological, but it's a physiological response going on in your body. And for real-time stress management, psychology doesn't work very well. In the long term, it can, but telling yourself, you got this, don't worry, don't be nervous, doesn't work very well. And if you've ever tried telling someone else, just be, don't be nervous, they're probably going to get a lot more nervous, right? It backfires. It doesn't work very well. So you need you need physiological tools to handle a physiological reaction. It might sound simple, but it's key to understanding this stuff. So how do we then, what are some of the most effective physiological tools we can use then? Well, in my experience and based on like all the science I've been able to find on this topic, it revolves around breath work. And if I'd heard this 10 years ago, I would have laughed and been like, oh, woo-hoo, ha, 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 new age, breathing, I do that all the time. I've spent the last 5 years learning about breath work. I do it every day. It's very, very powerful. So a way to think about it is that your breath follows the nervous system. So for example, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, you breathe in different ways depending on which one you're in. So for example, sympathetic, if someone jumps out and scares you, right? You don't go, ah, right? You go, you're drawing breath in. You need that, it's for the physiological reaction and, to get oxygen to your muscles, all that good stuff, right? The other way around, if you're relieved about something, you don't go, right? You go, ah, you're calming down. And so it also works the other way around, that the nervous system follows the breath, right? Again, if you're getting amped to do something, you're not going to sit there and go like, if you're running real fast, you're not, your breath is going to be like, so you can kind of force yourself into either branch of the nervous system by doing the two. If you want, very few of us needs to get more amped or like more into the sympathetic nervous system when we're nervous and we're going on stage. But a way to do that is to emphasize the inhale, like I talked about before. So doing forced breathing like that, where you're really emphasizing the inhale and getting essentially as much oxygen in your body as possible, that gets you amped up there. The other way around is focusing on the exhale. And that was also something that was a high experience to me when I learned about that, because people have always told me, take deep breaths, but people very rarely talk about doing deep exhales to calm down. And that is the thing that works best, essentially, focusing on breathing, focusing on exhaling. And you can try it. I mean, I wear a heart rate monitor and a chest strap and stuff, and if I do breath work, I can just see my heart rate dropping. You can do the test yourself. So there's a couple of different breathing techniques that I personally find really, really powerful, and that I've also had experience with other people doing well with. And there's lots of science to back them up. There's a couple of different ones here, but all of them revolve around emphasizing the exhale. So there's a very, well, actually, no, I'll add that one afterwards, sorry. The first one it's called the physiological sigh. And it's actually something that humans and other mammals do a couple of times throughout the day without really thinking about it. Babies do it too. And it's kind of this double inhale where you go like, but you kind of, and now I'm trying to do it naturally. I'll do it more explicitly afterwards. But it's essentially you draw in a breath, and then you have this extra one, and then you kind of have a long sigh afterwards. An exaggerated way of doing that would be to inhale through your nose, and then do an extra one at the end, and then do a long exhale, essentially as long as you can. And that has to be through the mouth because it's easier to control. So of course you can control your lips and so on. So you can control how much breath goes out. So for example, you can go. And I mean, it's almost instantaneous. For me anyways, it's virtually immediately that I start calming down, and it just brings the system down. So that one is really, really powerful, performing it before you're going on stage. I do this to go to sleep at night also. And you probably don't want to, try to go to sleep before you go on stage, but usually we're so high on adrenaline and all this other stuff that that's not really a risk. But anyways, doing breath work like this before going on stage can really help. There's another one I've been doing lately that in some ways I actually find more powerful. It's probably a little bit easier to perform also. It's similar to box breathing. If you might have heard of box breathing, which is essentially inhale 4 seconds, hold 4 seconds, exhale 4 seconds, so on. Um, but this one is essentially a triangular breathing. So you're going to inhale for 4 seconds, you're going to hold your breath for 4 seconds, and you're going to exhale for 8 seconds, and then go straight back into 4 second breathing. So it'd be like, and so on and so on. I might be doing that a little bit faster than 4 seconds. But anyways, another added benefit from that one is that the act of counting the seconds takes your mind off whatever else is going on in there. So it's kind of a double effect. It takes a little bit of practice, but again, this one it's super powerful. And it's like before going on stage, half an hour before or something, I'll find somewhere quiet where I can sit and I'll do some breath work, and I'm just trying to get control over the nervous system. Earlier days when I wasn't as experienced, I was trying to do the opposite. I was actually amping myself to insane levels. But I mean, I will almost be scaring the audience, right? Because because I was so hyper, like, 100% for me feels natural, but for the audience, they're like, 150. So if I need to kind of dial it a little bit back, because if I can go to about 75 or 80% of what to me seems like a reasonable energy level, for the audience, that feels like 100%. So for me, it's important to actually bring it down. And also, it's one of those things where it just helps me get a little bit more grounded. And also just even without doing any of the exercises I talked about, just focusing on your breath immediately brings you out of your head and into your body. Again, it might sound silly, but I really encourage you to try it because it makes a huge difference. Another thing that has worked for me is, and this obviously is not for everyone, and it might sound controversial and stuff, but one of the things that has quite helped me a lot as far as controlling my emotional responses in general, especially stress response, as far as getting really worked up or upset or angry and so on, is actually doing ice baths. Uh, so for years now, I have a freezer out here I've set up with, like, very cold water, about 3 degrees Celsius. I can't remember. It's like 38 degrees or something Fahrenheit. The interesting thing I found out once I started doing that was there's some physiological or physical benefits to it, but to me, it's actually more the psychological effects of it. It does, of course, elicit a strong physiological reaction, but that has helped me with some psychological issues, in the sense that when you jump in water that cold, your body and your brain is essentially saying, get out, you will die. But it's under controlled conditions, because you can jump out at any time. You are in control. But having repeated that a lot, what I found is putting myself in controlled conditions where my nervous system just goes completely nuts, and then learning to breathe through it and just sit there for a couple of minutes before I get out has just helped me just cope in other situations that get really overwhelming for me. So I know that's an advanced tip. It's not for everyone, but cold showers and stuff like that can work really well as well. But it's a question of getting under controlled conditions where you are in complete control, practicing managing response to your nervous system just going all over the place. And sorry, Craig, were you saying something? No. Okay. Cool. Okay. Those are some of the fundamentals, right? So a couple of things, just reiterate again, important points. This is a completely reasonable reaction to getting on stage in a very high pressure situation. Nothing to be ashamed about. It doesn't in any way, shape, or form indicate that you're not competent or that you're an imposter or anything like that. And it's a physiological response. psychology doesn't work very well for, real-time stress management. Physiological tools do. Breathwork is one of the most powerful ones. Okay, and now let's get into, unless there's any questions here, let's get into just some different practical tips that I've used a lot personally, and that I've know have had effect on the people I've taught them to also. The other thing is, I haven't been reading the questions, is there? Nice. Okay, let's see. Okay, so one of the things I used to not do at all because I wanted my presentation to be a little bit kind of, crazy and on the spot, was I didn't use to practice at all, which could heavily backfire because on a good day, I could really be on a roll, and on a bad day, it would just kind of all fall apart. So practicing now is one of the main things I do. I practice a lot. I also spend a lot of time on my presentations. They're reasonably elaborate. I have a lot of storylines and all this kind of stuff. So I also need to practice in order to have perfect delivery and perfect timing. But in general, just the more you practice, the more confident you'll be, the better you'll know your material. So practice, 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 practice. And I know there's some people who might have other advice as far as not doing it that way. That one of the pieces of pushback I hear is that if you rehearse a lot, then it will sound rehearsed. But my point is, you don't stop practicing at the point where it sounds rehearsed. Like, you keep going till you know your presentation so well that it doesn't sound rehearsed at all. You just know it so well, and that also frees you up to be able to freestyle and go here and there, and work off of the vibe of the audience and so on. When you know your presentation that well, it frees up just cognitive load. Essentially, you have to spend less focus just remembering what to say and so on, that you can actually focus on having a good time and performing, and really giving the audience a great experience. On that note, on practicing, one thing that I've found to be very, very effective, and again, I know I've heard this from a lot of people I've taught it also, is practicing your intro, practicing the first couple of minutes of your talk extensively over and over and over again. Because, and I think you all have had the same experience, that's where like peak nerves, peak stress is just before you walk on stage, and when you walk on stage, that's when things are like all over the place and the most crazy. That's also the situation where you really need to establish yourself, because you have the undivided attention of the audience. So you really need to have a strong intro. Also, that's where there's a tendency for most things to go wrong. A technical glitch, your slides don't work, there's no audio, all kinds of different things that can happen. The better you know your intro, the more confident you'll be, and the more you can just, roll with it, whatever happens. So first step there, of course, is to actually have an intro practice that you can do. That's step one. And then step two, of course, is to practice it a lot, so whatever happens when you go on stage, you'll be able to deliver it. But another technique there, an added benefit, is what you can do is before you go on stage, and this is something I do before every single presentation, I'm walking around, pacing, and then I'm practicing my intro in my head. I'm practicing, like I just suggested. But the other thing is, it keeps my brain from going to nasty places. It keeps my brain from, thinking about all the horrible things that can happen on stage and why I'm so nervous. It just keeps my brain preoccupied, and it's something that's relevant actually to what I'm about to do. So that can be very, very effective. Let's see what else. Another thing, yeah, Kelly.
Adam has a question for you.
Oh, cool.
What's a good way to practice? Recorded or in front of people?
I love questions about practicing. Yeah, you can record it. I mean, I would just start doing it alone first. I think, I mean, it depends on what works best for you. But I personally, I would probably practice it in the ways I will I will suggest now, before going to doing it for others, or recording it. So what I try to do personally is do a couple of dry runs front to back, to get an idea of am I on time? And how do I need to cut back? Like I have a 30-minute talk. This is 10. So you get an estimate there. And this is just rough. It's not perfect. That's one of the hardest things for me is actually doing a rough practice of my talk, because I have a tendency to stop every time I hit a roadblock and then just practice that. But you need to do it front to back a couple of times, and then take notes along the way, mental notes, or write it down or whatever, of the difficult transitions, the difficult parts of the talk, because there's going to be some that flow very easily, and there are going to be some that are really hard. And for me personally, it's also just passages, for example, transitioning from here to here. That was not elegant. I repeated myself a lot. I just didn't like how I did that. Write those down, and then afterwards, those little pieces, take those out and practice only them, because going through the whole thing over and over again is just exhausting, like a 30-minute talk. So I would just take out those little pieces and just keep hammering them until you're like, suddenly you're like, there we go. That's the way I need to say it. This works really well. So once you've done that for a bit, or another thing also is that can also free you up to finding time for practicing. If you only have half an hour here or there, you can take little bits like that. Once you're pretty comfortable with that and you feel like you have a good flow, then I'd start recording myself, because I think it's too early otherwise, I would say, because there's going to be too many bugs essentially, and it's going to be hard to watch. It'll be better to watch. And also the other thing is you're going to be more ready for feedback and more ready for doing it in front of other folks if you've gotten it down to doing it pretty well first. That would be my advice. On the other hand, if you work with a coach, when I work with people, I do sometimes try to pressure them to actually just do a dry run for me. But that's essentially me trying to, well, in a nice way, force them to do that initial front to back practice round. But that's in front of another person. But it's different than doing it, I think, in front of other folks who you're not in that kind of intimate situation with.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Is it all right if I ask a follow-on question?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no. How do you evaluate your own performance? Because if I watch myself, I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. So
that's interesting. Well,
like it's hard to
mm,
disassociate your own
yeah.
personal cringe to actually, I might have delivered something fine. So have you got any tips for that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't typically record myself and watch it back when I'm practicing, for some of the reasons you mentioned. And I mean, there's a lot of times if I've listened to podcasts with myself, I'm like, oh, God damn, like, oh, and then I would say lately I've had more positive experiences as far as watching, like, recordings of myself on stage and so on. So I think I would just say if it's just making things worse, I don't think there's any reason to actually record yourself and watch it. Because I mean, you could just be making it worse for yourself, and then get feedback from others and get on stage and so on. But that's the other thing, is like it's exposure therapy, right? The more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it, and it's hard. It's really hard. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it's like one of the biggest fears we have in the Western world. Like for some people, more than the fear of death. So slowly get into it and do it more and more, and then also I think just it's a long journey, right? So I mean, some of the early talks I did, if I see them now, I'm like, it's terrible. But the audiences loved it at that time. So maybe also don't expect to be like the perfect speaker on day one. Just, and then another thing I would say is just keep learning from every single experience, right? Instead of potentially being like down about what maybe didn't go so well and so on, or some comments, whatever, then learn everything you can from it, and then already be thinking about how to improve next time and how to make it better. That would, yeah, be my advice. Another thing, just super easy practical little thing, is if you can get on stage before you do your talk, as a little thing that can help, because then it's kind of maybe it's the wrong psychological principle, but pattern recognition, I think, in a way. But you've been on stage, you've walked around there, you kind of know what to expect. So it's one less thing that's new for your brain when you walk on stage. You've been there before, you've kind of got a little bit familiar with it and so on. And also just any little things, for example, technical stuff, make sure you know your slides work and everything, and preferably make sure all this stuff before you when you send your slides or whatever to the conference before you rock up there, make sure that if you're on a Mac, that it actually works with a Mac, etc. Is it a handheld mic? Is it a headset? All those things. Make sure you know all that. An example from a conference I spoke at recently, there was a speaker who was reasonably new. I think it was one of her first talks, and she assumed that there would be a monitor showing speaker notes, which there rarely is. Not a lot of conferences do that. But that was really rough for her because that completely, knocked her out because she was relying on her speaker notes. And 10 minutes before going on stage, she was like, no, there's no speaker notes. Right? So make sure you've got all that stuff down. The other thing I would say, no, I'm just going off on a bit of a tangent here, is again, with practicing, I'd be very, very careful to practice with notes. Because what I find is if you use notes, you very quickly become dependent on them, and it's harder to unlearn those notes, or it's harder to do without notes. So I sometimes write down passages, but those are mainly the ones where I'm really having difficulty figuring out how to say it. I might sit down there, write down a couple of different versions, but I'm not going to script the whole talk, and I'm certainly not going to stand there and read, because it's just going to make it harder for me to flow naturally and remember it. Also, personally anyways, I find that there's a difference between how I deliver something when I talk compared to when I write. And so if I just read it aloud, it just doesn't flow. It just doesn't work for me. I need to figure out how I'm going to say it physically. Another thing, just low-hanging fruit, or just a very maybe a stupid tip or whatever, is just stick to material that you know really well. I mean, there's an inherent confidence in that, and so I mean, I'm not. I've done talks that revolve around psychology and so on. I'm not a psychology professor or anything like that, but it's subject matter that I've worked with extensively in my career as a CRO, and I've worked with people who have PhDs in this stuff and so on. So even if it's a little bit out of my, core competency, I know it well enough that I know what I'm saying is will hold up to scrutiny and so on. And I have seen really talented speakers kind of become worse and worse rated by the audiences when they kind of abandon some of their core material and the stuff that they're really good at and they really know, because there's a bit of an allure of having a different topic or whatever, or going with something that your boss wants or something like that. I'll just be really, really careful with that. It does shine through. There's nothing worse. Well, there's a lot that's worse, but one of the things that's very cringeworthy is seeing the CEO on stage doing a presentation where it's clear that he hasn't done any work, practical on the floor work for like 10 years, and he asked the team for some case studies and stuff. It's horrible, and I think that's a prime example. Okay. Another thing is creating a routine. So that could be even starting the night before. If you're at the hotel or whatever, if you're speaking at a conference, figure out kind of a routine you can stick to, as far as stuff around what makes you sleep well, what makes you relax, and so on, and avoiding the things that are going to get you amped up and so on, and having a routine for what you do in the morning before you have to go to the conference. Are you going to practice before you go to the venue? There might be certain clothes that you feel extra comfortable in. I freestyle more now, but I used to have certain shoes. Not in a super what's it called, superstitious way, that terrible things would happen if I didn't wear these shoes, but more like I feel really comfortable in these shoes, right? So I know I'm gonna be able to rock it and so on. So just all those little things around the routine that you can build up that can help make you feel really comfortable and calm before you go on stage. And then when you are on stage, one of the things that I hear a lot is, especially for new speakers, is it can be quite awkward and uncomfortable when you're standing there alone on stage and you just have an ocean of faces looking at you, just judging every single movement and every single word you say, naturally, of course. It takes some experience, I think, to get comfortable with that. But what happens to a lot of us is we start overanalyzing, and then you're kind of focusing more on trying to figure out what people are thinking about your presentation rather than focusing on actually delivering a really good presentation. And it can be very, very difficult to gauge what people are feeling from their facial expressions. I mean, there's also cultural, things where I've spoken, well, in Denmark, where I'm from, for example, you know, people have a tendency to be pretty stone-faced and so on. So, or even individuals in the audience who are like, this guy hates me. This is like, and then the person works up to you after the talk and goes, I loved it. That was amazing. You're like, oh, okay. I thought you hated it. So it's just, you have to be really careful being too preoccupied with it. I mean, if someone is sitting there violently shaking their head or something like that, it's probably an indication. But anyways, so one of the techniques that can work really well there is, or no, before I say that, one of the coping mechanisms I've heard from people is the not looking at the audience, looking at the wall or something, which I would strongly advise against, because eye contact with the audience is super important, like looking at them, if you know, for that connection. So I would be very careful with that. But what you can do is work with what I call positive audience anchors. So that means there's always, well, I have to be careful what I'm saying, like in most cases there's going to be a couple of people in the audience who obviously enjoy what you're doing. It could be some friends or something like that, and it essentially friendly faces where you can see that they're enjoying it. They're smiling, they're nodding along or something like that. And then you can, you know, use them as positive anchors and actually look at them, focus on them while you're talking. But of course you can't have one positive audience anchor because that's going to be really awkward for the rest of the audience. Just looking at one person. It's also going to be awkward for the person you're staring down intensely for the full 30-minute talk. But what you can do is then divide the audience into 3 sections. For example, you have front, you have right and left, and then identify one positive audience anchor in each. So you have 3, because that means that you can walk around naturally, you can scan, and you can, you know, look across the whole audience, but you're gonna land on those anchors, right? And then the audience will be none the wiser, because they're just seeing you, you know, look across the room and then landing on those positive anchors. And what I personally do, if I've hosted a couple of conferences where I've made sure to be in the front row, or if I'm there with people I've coached, I make sure to be sitting very close to them so they can see me, and then I kind of exaggerated, like, you know, not that exaggerated, but I you know, heavily emphasize laughter and nodding along and stuff like that. Really positive reinforcement every single time that they look at me, and I've seen the effects of that happening. I also had feedback on it. So also, if you have someone in the on stage that you're rooting for, then you can be the, you know, be the positive anchor for them. A more advanced technique based on that I use is, when I identify someone who looks sleepy or looks like they're not really into it, I'll intensely stare at them, you know, or really talk to them and try to elicit a reaction. And usually it works. They kind of go or whatever, they, you know, and then sometimes it backfires and you kind of have a staring contest. You're playing chicken with someone. They just, so that's a bit more advanced, but yeah, a good way of practicing it. Personally, I try to really vary where I'm looking, try to look at as many people in the audience as possible, and get contact with as many as possible. I mean, personally, I'll walk up all the way to the edge of the stage and kind of almost be looming over people in a non-threatening way, but just to really get, you know, I want to get as much contact as possible. I think that was the last concrete tip I had today. Again, I don't have any slides to refer to. Yeah, I think these are the main things I've brought with me today. But we also covered quite a bit. But I mean, if there's any questions you have, I'd really love to hear them. Or if there's any situations you've been in where you didn't know how to manage nerves or something, please share them. I'd love to hear, and hopefully be able to give you some advice.
That was amazing. I can't believe you did that without slides.
Thanks a lot. My ending needs a bit of work, but yeah, other than that, thank you very much.
Awesome. I see Sonny typing. I'll let you type. Well, unless you want to just, okay, yeah, question. Why don't you just ask your question, Sonny? Come on.
Because I want the Slack history to be there for people who don't watch the video and all that
Oh, I
stuff.
see.
That's very fair, but now you
That's very thoughtful. Yes. How do you
It's
recover
very
if you feel like things are not going well mid-talk or
Oh,
early in the
yeah.
talk or
Great
something like that?
That's a fantastic question.
I know.
That's why you're here. That's yeah. How do you do that? I mean, there's so many different ways. I mean, so overall, a tip there, when something goes wrong on stage, because inevitably it will, not for every single talk, but at some point. I think it depends on what's going wrong, right? But like if there's a technical hiccup with the slides or something going on like that, or whatever, something weird happens, someone leaves the audience or something like that, I would. The main thing is just. Or for example, if you tell a joke that doesn't land and so on, the main thing is just keep going, like pretend like you're not even fazed by it, or preferably make a joke about it. So yeah, exactly, something weird happens, a slide or something like that. Just make a joke about it, carry on and so on. You could actually have practice having some backup stuff. So if your slides don't load or whatever, you're not standing there like you might have whatever you can deliver, because you've probably recognize this too. You can make things a lot worse if you start getting angry or start getting upset on stage, because like the audience is feeding off of that. And a lot of times people will sympathize with you if there's a technical glitch or something like that. They'll be on your side, and you actually get them on the side. And the better you handle it in that situation, the better of a sport you are, or whatever, like the more you'll have the audience on your side. I mean, I've been on stage where I haven't gotten the reaction from the audience that I was hoping, like, the zombie audience, where they're just not reacting. And I did the talk a couple of days before, and people were, falling off the chairs laughing, and it's just not working. And in that situation, it's just, poker face, game face, and just keep going.
Maybe it was the morning after a karaoke night or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Shocker.
Exactly.
Wake up, everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And then, yeah, exactly. I mean, and just keep your energy levels up and just keep going. And that does take some practice to be unfazed, but just keep going, right? And again, you can never be sure if they really do hate you or whether something else is going on. But a couple of examples there is some of the most cringe things I've seen on stage. I remember this one guy I saw on stage some years ago where he had a bunch of jokes. I have lots of jokes and stuff in my talks, but I'm not my presentation is not hinged upon them working. I arranged them in such a way that if people don't find them funny, I can act like it was supposed to be funny. But anyways, I saw this guy on stage. He was from the United States. He was doing a presentation in Germany. Germans did not find him funny, but he paused for the laughter and applause every time he delivered a joke, and it was just crickets. It was just
Pause for
silence.
laughter.
Pause for laughter. And you could just see this guy kind of like just increasingly just digging a deeper and deeper hole for himself. That was bad. Another one I've seen not too long ago was another presenter who just kind of built in a lot of audience participation throughout the presentation, and the audience was just not interested in participating. It was also kind of a bit of a patronizing way that presenter did it. But anyways, there's supposed to be all these audience interactions along the way, like a lot, 10 or something, and the audience just was not participating. And then instead of leaving them alone and not doing it, the presenter just got more increasingly annoyed with the audience, and almost started scolding, like, really? No, none of you? And I was just like, oh, this is the worst thing you can do. Like you're not only is the audience turning on you, you're actually, giving them increased motivation to turn on you, because now you're actually getting angry at them for not doing the thing they don't want to do, which was just terrible. Yeah, anyways, off on a tangent there, but yeah.
So what would you do if the audience turns on you?
Well, first of all, I try to feed off the energy from the beginning. So I try to be really in tune with what's happening and where they're going and so on, and try to that's intuition. That's intuition for me. What do I need to crank up? What don't I? Maybe this joke won't land here and stuff. But no, I just keep going. I just keep going. Keep my energy high. I can't think of a time where I've really addressed it with the audience. I just do my thing, keep going, stay strong, kind of thing. I think that's the only way to do it. I generally don't have audiences turn on me. I usually get along pretty well with the audience.
Hard to imagine. You're so likable.
Thank you. But I have had experiences where I've been pretty disappointed with some of the feedback afterwards. And that's another thing I think that's important actually to talk about is audience feedback. I generally get really good feedback from audiences. I always read them. I know speakers who kind of refuse to read it. I think it's really important because you learn from it. It's almost like being a company saying you don't want to pay attention to user feedback. I mean, I think it's really important, but it can also be extremely painful to read. And I think I'm one of those speakers where most of the audience likes me, but there's always like one or two who just utterly hate me. And so I'm always prepared for at least 2 comments where it's like, this guy sucks. Like, really? The keynote with this guy? I had one comment at a conference last year where it says, it was I'm paraphrasing, but basically not fun, or it wasn't funny and I didn't learn anything. Shit. Okay, well, can't get much worse than that,
But
huh?
also
You
not
can't please-
constructive.
You can't please everyone.
No,
Okay.
exactly. Exactly. But I think that's another part of it is like reacting to audience feedback, right? And it can be really frustrating because you're not in it's not a two-way conversation, and especially if people haven't if they misunderstood something you said, that's terrible because you're like screaming at the screen. You're like, that wasn't what I said. Reading audience feedback, I think, is really important as far as learning, but it's also, you have to be careful that it doesn't bring you down, right? So now I mentally prepare that there's going to be horrible comments that I'm going to make me feel really, really bad, and if there aren't, then it's a positive surprise, because I used to like take it so bad, and I could spend weeks being depressed over a couple of bad comments on a presentation, or I'd go through like all the different stages of grief, like denial, and then you finally get to acceptance and blah blah blah.
Yes, Marcella.
So I've got a question on, I guess, if you know why this happens or you know how to help it not happen. I speak quite quickly anyway.
Yes.
When I'm nervous,
Yep.
I speak even faster.
Yep.
And it basically means that the information that sounds great in my head becomes virtually undigestible to anyone listening to me. And it can be quite hard to even realize when I'm doing it until I finish and I realize, oh, we're like 10 minutes ahead of schedule. Oh no, I've done it again. Any tips?
Yes, I'm a natural speed talker myself, machine gunning information. So, and that's what I did on stage for many years before I kind of reinvented myself. One of the things I noticed was people couldn't tell the difference between my presentations. Like, it'd be like, I've seen you do that one before. It's like, no, it's a new presentation. I was like, Jesus, like people can't understand what I'm saying essentially. But it's hard to do. And like you said, like one of the natural reactions when you get nervous is to speak even faster. But the only way to do it really is to, or in my experience, is to essentially force yourself to slow down and practice it, and just very, very consciously slow down. But the thing is, for you, it will feel awkward, especially in the beginning. It'll feel like you're right. But for the audience, it'll sound normal. If I go at my 100% rate, it's crazy. Like people like squinting their eyes trying to pay attention. If I go at 75 or 80, then it's completely reasonable for them, and for me it sounds slow. So it's also, and in a situation like this, I get excited, so I'm speaking a lot faster than I would for a rehearsed keynote on stage, because part of what I'm rehearsing and practicing is the pace and is slowing down. Another thing I personally like to do, and part of it is just kind of intuition, but one of the things I like to do in a talk is just vary the intonation, and then sometimes I'll just whisper, and you know what happened, or something like that, or then, and then this, you can kind of, vary it like that, and then that kind of automatically helps you be more conscious about your pace and so on, because then it's very hard to speed talk if you build in pauses and stuff like that. The other thing you can do, which was actually a tip I forgot about before, which is overall great, is it's kind of, it can help you snap out of autopilot mode, because that's one of the things I find happens when you get really nervous or worked up is, you're going to fight or flight, and you're not in control anymore. It's just like things are just happening, right? And you don't know what you're doing on stage and so on. And I've also had to practice pacing less, because I used to walk on stage like that, and it looks like people are watching a ping pong match, and people would just get exhausted. So one thing that helps there, for example, is just building in pauses along the way, so that you know when you get to this or that slide, for example, or this part in the talk, this is where I pause for 5 seconds before I keep going. And again, to you, it'll feel crazy awkward because you're like, this is like, feel like, a couple of minutes, but to the audience, it's fine, right? A couple of seconds pause, but that is just an opportunity to just stop for a second and go, what am I doing here? What did I just cover, and where am I going now? Okay, cool. And then you can kind of slow down. So if you can build those in along the way, that can help a lot. But it is very difficult, but it is also very important, just like you're saying. And I maybe that touches on an overall subject matter that I personally find kind of interesting is it like a balance between being yourself and being authentic. And I think that's very important as a speaker. You shouldn't try to do stuff that doesn't come natural. You have to find your speaker personality. I try to always be myself. On stage, I'm a slightly exaggerated version, but I'm still very much true to myself. But I don't think that means that you can't improve and that you can't learn from the audience, that you can't learn how to make it a more enjoyable experience for them and cater to them. Because I think there is I think the opposite, there's two polar opposites. One is like completely only doing what the audience wants and so on. But the other thing is being like really stubborn about, I will be unapologetically me, because maybe you need to adjust some things. I certainly have learned that it's the same thing with, swearing, for example. I think that it's very, very context dependent. And I know speakers who are like, fuck you, I swear all the time, so I'm going to, this is me, and so on. So I think it's a balance there again, right? And I also think that if you're doing a keynote at a good conference, especially if you're getting paid, I mean, you have a responsibility to that audience. They're essentially your customers, and I think you have to figure out like who they are and how to deliver to them. Another thing is, if you have an important message, it to me, it doesn't make sense to deliver it then in a way that makes it harder for them to receive your message. What was the most scary talk you ever did? The one. I've been so nervous about a lot of them. Yeah, Greg remembers me from back in the day before I learned how to control my nerves better, when I would just pace like a wild animal for half an hour before I went on stage. Like, people would be talking about it, be like, what's this guy doing? This is insane. I've had people also tell me like, dude, I thought you were going to pass out when you were walking backstage, and then you actually, did a great presentation. The most scary talk.
A question too, over on the calls channel.
Yeah, I can't remember what the most scary is. There's been a lot.
Nick asked, and we're at time, but Nick asked, I have a question about how to balance the content of a talk for a mixed audience. But
I can elaborate a bit more. Hey, Michael. I'm speaking at a conference soon where the audience is kind of from across all areas of e-commerce. Obviously, I'm doing a talk around CRO, but there'll be some people in that audience who have deep knowledge, they're doing it, they're actioning that. Others who probably haven't even begun their journey on it.
Sure.
So just any advice on how to balance that so that you cater for the most people you can?
I mean, that can be difficult. I mean, at least they're all in e-com, right? They're not all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's ideal if you have a very specific audience. They're all beginners and they're interested in their e-com and they're interested in this one thing here. But I mean, when you have a mixed audience, it's probably gonna be people where you're off target or whatever, But a couple of things that can help there is what I try to do anyways with my talks, because I do also speak at a lot of conferences that are quite mixed, and also just maybe general marketing conferences and so on. I'll say what I do, and then I'll give you some advice off of that. So what I typically try to do is I try to find a topic that's a bit unusual. And the last one I did was the psychology of disappointment, which I thought was like a fascinating topic. If you can have like an overarching kind of somewhat novel theme that kind of high level the challenges a little bit how people think, or just something that's new to them. We're like, oh, I've never thought of that before. if you can do that, if you can then also have reasonably high entertainment value to your talk, then people can be like, well, it wasn't really anything new for me, but it was a fantastic presenter. I had a lot of fun. That can help. But then also kind of having the mix between again, the more high level stuff or strategic stuff, and then also having some actionable tidbits in there. What I do find across the board for e-commerce audiences is they seem to enjoy practical stuff a lot. Yeah. I've had talks I've done at generalist marketing conferences that have gone perfectly, not go very well at e-commerce conferences, because there seems to be an expectation there that I'm going to get concrete things I can do right away. So that is one thing I would focus heavily on. So in a presentation like that, you could maybe mix it between like some beginner tips and some more advanced, if that's possible. So you're kind of catering to a wider audience. You could also, yeah, mix it up like that, or you could try to delve into, spinning off a little bit what I said before, something that is maybe not the most complicated subject matter, but something that is a little bit new to everyone, or where you have, where you have a reasonable assumption that not a lot of people in the room have worked with this or have used this angle or whatever it is you're talking about. AI. Well, that's no longer the thing.
No one's talking about that, right?
Everybody's talking about that, exactly. But if you can find an angle like that can really help a lot. Yeah, cool. Thanks, Michael. No problem. Or actually, sorry, if you can show like ways that not just the boring case study, but maybe how you have specifically done this, or if you have a unique take on it. I think that
Michael,
really
you want an interesting fact from a conference organizer?
Yes.
If you're speaking in the US, use case studies.
Oh, I see. Yep.
If you're speaking in Europe,
yeah,
do not use case studies. European audiences hate case studies. American, North American audiences love case studies, and they want more examples. Not
I see. Yeah, but I think, but there's
it's
also
weird.
No, it is, but I think there's also a difference between case studies and more like examples of how I've been able to do this in my work. I think there's a bit of a difference there. But yeah,
they want to see like test examples.
Yeah. The rest of us are bored with that. But also, I mean, there's also you don't have to have a completely unique or novel topic as long as you have your own spin or a unique spin on it. And I think those talks can be extremely interesting, because, for example, at Conversion Hotel this year, we had oh shit, I can't remember her name. That's embarrassing. Anyways, one of the speakers was talking about experimentation culture. We've heard a lot about experimentation culture, and but she had done it in a completely unique way. So she had examples of doing things for the team that I wouldn't even have dreamt of, and they worked really, really well. So she had a topic that's we've very much used, but she had this unique spin on it that actually made it much more interesting.
We're very over time, but I really want to
thank you.
Question.
I gotta go eat dinner also with my.
Okay, well, go answer Sonny's question in the chat.
Yes,
and
I will.
Go eat your dinner because it's pretty funny. All right. Bye, everybody. Next talk is April 25th, and it's Tim Wilson, and he's going to talk about analytics the right way. So everybody come see Tim Wilson, April 25th. Bye, everybody, and thanks, Michael, for going over.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, all.